Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Rich Gordon, and I am a member of the California State Assembly, and I'm here and chairing the Assembly Select Committee on Waste Reduction and Recycling in 21st Century California. My colleagues on the committee will be in and out during the course of the afternoon. We have just finished respective party caucus lunches, and there was a lot of excess conversation, or extra conversation, not necessarily excess, because of issues that we're dealing with in the upcoming 3 and 4 weeks, and with special sessions. So I know I will be joined by some of my colleagues during the course of the afternoon, but you're here, and we want to get started. Let me just start by saying that, candidly, we are a society that just generates too much waste. We throw too much away. We, in many ways, are a disposable society. And many of our products are designed and built so that they can be disposed rather than reused. And 26 years ago, 1989, with the Integrated Waste Management Act, California moved into the brave new world of recycling. We established a single-stream recycling program. So for 26 years, we have been embarked in the recycling efforts in California. In 2011, with the passage of AB 341 by West Chesborough, we established a goal of reducing our waste by 75% by the year 2020. This goal of a 75% reduction was to be achieved through source reduction, recycling, and composting. In a recent report, CalRecycle said, and I quote, "In order for California to reach a statewide recycling rate of 75%, at least half of the solid waste that is currently disposed would need to be recycled." The goal of this select committee is to help the legislature understand what must be done to meet the 75% reduction goal. We begin today with a hearing to focus on where we have been and where we are at present with our recycling efforts. We'll also have a panel to help us begin to think about what's next. Future hearings will explore options to increase recycling, including the role of organics in food waste, hazardous waste, producer responsibility, and the reuse of recycled materials. We will explore infrastructure needs and the potential for job creation. I invite the members of the committee, the stakeholders, and the public to provide input to this select committee so that we can fully vet the issues that need to be considered in moving California to a more sustainable future. And with that, I would like to invite forward our first presenter, first panel for this, and this will be Scott Smithline. Scott is the director of CalRecycle. Let me also invite forward at the same time Karen Morrison from CalRecycle, who will also be talking during this first part of our panel. We will have presentations today, if you've seen the agenda, from CalRecycle. We will then have a panel, and following the panel, there will be an opportunity for public comment. So we will take public comment at the end of the hearing today, but we begin today with Scott Smithline. Mr. Smithline, welcome.
Mr. Chair and members who may be listening in, thank you very much for inviting the department to be here today. I'm the director of the Department of Resources, Recycling, and Recovery, otherwise known as CalRecycle. We're very pleased to be here today to talk about these key economic and environmental issues that are in the name of recycling, but frankly are aligned with all the key economic and environmental issues that we're dealing with today in the state of California. I'm just going to make a couple of brief remarks, and then my colleague Karen after that. So simply put, what we do at CalRecycle is we help the state achieve its waste reduction and recycling goals, and we do so in a way that ensures that we protect the public health, safety, and environment in California, for all Californians here. And in achieving those goals, as you mentioned previously, we have sort of solidified our status as maintaining 50% diversion under AB 939. And as you mentioned, the bar has been raised on that. It was raised in AB 341. And cutting our waste in half again is going to be different than cutting our waste the first time. We're going to have a different set of technologies. We're going to have smarter policies. It's not to say there's not some low-hanging fruit left, but it's really a different infrastructure that we're talking about developing here. I think the good news is that when we passed AB 939 some years ago, it was primarily based on a perceived shortage of landfill capacity. And we have certainly solved that problem. We have capacity to 2080 now. What we have now is a 75% recycling goal that is aligned with the greenhouse gas reduction goals of this legislature and the administration, the short-lived climate pollutant goals. It's aligned with the renewable energy and renewable fuel goals. It's aligned with healthy agricultural soils, and it's aligned with green jobs and in-state manufacturing. And so I think that will help us support where we need to go, the fact that this goal is so aligned with so many other economic and environmental goals in the state. The actions and investments that we make now will dictate how successful we are in achieving 75% recycling. I think the first thing we need to do when we talk about getting to 75% is recognize the magnitude of the infrastructure that we're talking about here. Just to give you an example with respect to the organics in the waste stream, which are approximately 1/3 of what we dispose, that's food waste, yard waste, green waste, wood waste. In order to divert that material from the landfill, we're talking about more than a doubling of the infrastructure that we currently have. We're talking about over 100 new facilities that process organics that need to be funded and sited and go through CEQA and local land use planning, et cetera. This is a very significant effort required for us to do. When you look at the more traditional commodities that we all put in our blue bin every day, the paper and the plastic and the glass, we've relied heavily on export markets for those materials. And there's nothing wrong with that. Those are healthy markets. But they're not sufficient to accommodate all the material that we are going to generate in the state of California to get to 75%. Some commodities will never have an export market. Organics is a good example of that. Heavy material like construction demolition debris, we will never have export markets for those materials. So we really need to focus the 75% effort on an in-state manufacturing infrastructure and developing markets for those materials in the state of California. And even more importantly, the fact that we collect, process, and sort, and bale, and export all this material, we leave ourselves out of the best part of the process. We export that material, the vast majority of it, and it comes back to us in value-added manufactured process. Well, there's no reason California shouldn't be reaping the rewards of having generated all that material and manufacturing products here within our own state and reaping those economic and environmental benefits. We've done a study that says if we meet 75% and manage 100% of that material in the state of California, it's good for 100,000 green jobs in the state of California. So there's a long way between here and there. When we achieved AB 939, we achieved AB 939 through teamwork between the state of California, local governments, private industry, and all Californians who basically participate in recycling every day. Recycling is still not competitive with landfilling for several reasons. Again, cutting our waste in half is going to require significant public investment in an infrastructure in the state of California. In addition, achieving 75% presents another challenge for us. If we cut our waste in half, we cut our revenue in half. Our department does not receive any general funds. Our operations are funded exclusively through tipping fees at disposal facilities. Achieving 75% will require us to double the infrastructure that we have, and it will cut our revenue in half at the same time. This is simply not a practical or a safe position for the state to be in. So we need to develop a diverse and a sustainable funding source so that we can not only achieve 75%, but that we can actually safely manage that infrastructure. And by the way, this problem is not just a state problem. Many local governments find themselves in the same position. So I think I'm going to close and move on to Karen and just say that we're prepared for this challenge, but we have many hard decisions to make about what we want the 75% infrastructure to look like and some commitments to get there. Thank you.
Thank you. We've just been hearing from Scott Smithline, the director of Cal Recycle, and we'll now hear from Karen Morrison with Cal Recycle. Following her presentation, we'll take some questions for both of you from the members of the committee. And let me welcome to the committee my colleagues, Marie Waldron, Jay Obermulti, and Brian Dolly. Thank you for being with us.
Right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members. My name is Karen Morrison. I'm with the Policy Office at Cal Recycle. Thank you for the chance to come and speak today about Cal Recycle's efforts in managing our waste reduction, recycling, and composting efforts in the state. As Director Smithline mentioned in his comments, Cal Recycle is firmly committed to and actively working toward our 75% statewide goal. This policy has really raised the bar for what we're focusing on for our recycling efforts within the state, and we believe that this will set the agenda for the department through 2020 and beyond. Today I want to contextualize some of Director Smithline's comments on our work toward the 75% goal with a brief history of Cal Recycle and its efforts in promoting recycling, beginning in the 1980s and continuing through today. And then in the second panel, I'll transition into a discussion about what we currently know or estimate about the recycling and composting infrastructure in California. That is, what do we have to support the 75% goal, as well as some closing comments on how we're doing at meeting those goals as we head toward 2020. Many of these topics are covered in greater detail in the State of Recycling report, which we released in March of this year and I believe was included in the packets. It's also available on Cal Recycle's website for those of you who are watching this remotely. I'll also be referring to a handout throughout the talk. I believe, again, that this was included in the packets, but I have extra copies in case that is not the case. Perfect. Thank you. So, history of Cal Recycle. Historically, Cal Recycle's efforts in recycling have originated from an excess of trash. The first formal statewide recycling program was established in 1986 under the Division of Recycling and then the Department of Conservation, and it targeted beverage containers that were found on the side of the road as litter. With the passage of AB 2020, the Beverage Container Recycling and Litter Reduction Act established a system for financial incentives and convenient return systems in order to ensure the efficient and large-scale collection and recycling of beverage containers. Although this program has been amended more than 75 times since the bill was first passed, in those intervening 30 years, the core mechanism of this program remains the same, and it is one of the most successful programs of its type in the nation. To give you a sense of scale of what this program covers, in 2014, Californians recycled an average of almost 50 million bottles and cans each day. So this is billions and billions of bottles and cans that are processed through this program. However, simply addressing the littered bottles and cans wasn't enough. And by 1989, California was facing a problem with trash as a whole. 90% of all generated waste in the state in that year was going to landfills. That amounted to about 44 million pounds of trash, with an average of 8.4 pounds per person per day that was entering landfills. In addition, California was facing a predicted landfill shortage. That is the assumption that there wouldn't be enough landfill space in order to take all of the waste that was being generated. And so in 1989, California adopted its first statewide general recycling program with the passage of AB 939, or the Integrated Waste Management Act. This legislation created the Integrated Waste Management Board and established a mandate that local jurisdictions, that is local governments, counties, and others, divert 25% of all solid waste from landfills by 1995, and then 50% of waste by the year 2000 and beyond. Cal Recycle measures progress toward this 50% diversion mandate in several ways. In addition to evaluating the amount of waste disposed by jurisdictions as an indicator of program performance, CalRecycle focuses on evaluating each jurisdiction's diversion programs. This focus on the programs that have been implemented by local governments and their continued efforts in reducing waste has contributed to the successes of AB 939 since it was passed over 25 years ago. Most local governments today are in compliance with the 50% diversion mandate, and those that aren't continue to work with CalRecycle staff and implement new programs in order to divert more waste from the landfill. We've also had success as a state under AB 939 with a 65% statewide diversion rate. Again, this is up from 10% when the program was started in 1989. In addition, residents in California on average threw away 4.5 pounds per person per day in 2014, which is about half of what it was in 1989. The material that is diverted from landfills may be source reduced, that is, never created as waste or reused in some other way, composted, recycled, or otherwise put to beneficial reuse as landfill cover or converted into energy. We've made great strides under AB 939, and these are summarized in Table 1 or Figure 1 in the handout. But as California's population continues to grow, with more people comes more trash. And even with our increasing diversion, we continue to face consistent increases in waste generation. And as a result, we haven't seen the corresponding overall decreases in waste disposal in landfills that we would like to see to go along with the 65% diversion rate. In addition, we've seen small increases in the total amount of disposed waste over the last 2 years, which is starting to become of some concern to us. In addition, many of the materials that are being disposed of are recyclable. So you can see in Figure 3 on the handout, based on our periodic waste characterization studies, almost 2/3 of the disposal stream could be readily composted or recycled using today's technology. That is waste that's composed of paper, glass, metal, plastics, or other organic materials. As the waste landscape evolves, we need stronger practices and policies to not just divert trash from the landfill, but also to recycle it to better use as well. In 2010, with the passage of SB 63, the Integrated Waste Management Board and the Division of Recycling merged into the department that we now call CalRecycle in order to create one department focused on recycling and waste management as a whole, thereby combining expertise on different aspects of the recycling infrastructure. In addition to merging these two independent programs, the second major revision to California's handling of recycling, really since the 1980s, came the following year with the passage of AB 341 in 2011. This bill did two things. First, it required CalRecycle to implement mandatory commercial recycling for businesses throughout California, and I'll talk more about this in the second panel of today's discussion. Second, AB 341 established a new statewide goal for California to achieve 75% recycling statewide by the year 2020 through a combination of source reduction, recycling, and composting. This new law changed several things about how CalRecycle is thinking about managing the waste stream, and these are summarized and compared to AB 939 in Figure 1. Briefly, AB 341 changed who is responsible for meeting the recycling target. Although local governments must continue to meet their 50% diversion mandate, it is the goal of the state to reach the 75% recycling goal. AB 341 also changed how we're counting our waste. We've adjusted our base years on which to establish our target disposal, and using this calculation in order to achieve 75% recycling means that the state can landfill no more than 2.7 pounds per person per day. In contrast, the 50% diversion mandate has a statewide target of 6.3 pounds per person per day, so the bar is much, much higher. And again, in 2014, our disposal rate was 4.5 pounds per person per day. Finally, AB 341 also changed what we count as recycling. Under CalRecycle's implementation of AB 341, the only activities that count toward the goal are source reduction, recycling, and composting programs. One consequence of this is that several material uses that count toward diversion under AB 939 and continue to count toward diversion for local governments no longer count toward recycling under AB 341. And these include alternative daily cover, alternative intermediate cover at landfills, as well as other beneficial reuse at landfills, transformation of waste to energy, and waste hire derived fuel. We instead classify these 5 material uses as disposal-related activities. And so under AB 341, California has a statewide recycling rate of 50% in 2014, and this has improved only a little bit since 2020. In order for California to reach a statewide recycling rate of 75%, at least half of the solid waste that is currently being disposed would need to be recycled. And we estimate that in 2020, this corresponds to roughly 22 million tons of material that needs to be recycled or composted or source reduced beyond our current efforts. And we've shown this graphically for each person in Figure 2. We're removing to less and less trash that's being generated by each person. This is a large lift and one that we are aggressively working toward. Our final 75% plan is in the final stages of review and will be released in the next few weeks. This plan outlines CalRecycle's priorities in implementing the 75% goal. In addition, we are continuing to push ahead with new programs in order to move past 50% recycling. And in the second panel, I'll get into some of those specific programs and what we currently know about our recycling infrastructure, what we're doing to help develop that infrastructure, and where we plan to go from here. And before we transition, I'd be happy to address any questions that may have come up.